It was a cold November morning when I parked outside a small cafe on the edge of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. I wasn't there for coffee. I sat behind the steering wheel, staring at a photo on my phone, a torn piece of a newspaper puzzle. 4 letters had been circled in blue ink. The handwriting was uneven, the kind that comes with aching joints and old age, but I recognized it immediately. It was my grandmother's. For nearly 3 years, I'd been waiting for a sign exactly like this. Most families assumed I was a disappointment. According to my parents, I'd wasted my education, moved away, and spent my life drifting from one meaningless job to another. They repeated that story at church gatherings, birthday parties, family reunions, even to neighbors who barely knew me. Eventually, everyone believed it. No one ever asked me what I actually did for a living. That ignorance would become the biggest mistake my parents ever made. Because investigating people who steal from elderly family members wasn't just my career. It was what I had spent the last decade doing. And now I feared my own grandmother had become one of those victims. What happened later that Thanksgiving afternoon shocked everyone sitting around the dinner table. But before I tell you how everything unraveled, you need to understand how my family slowly convinced themselves that I was worthless, and how one tiny hidden message exposed years of lies. My name is Claire. I'm 35 years old. For the past 10 years, I've worked as a senior investigator with Adult Protective Services in Eastern Tennessee. Every morning before sunrise, I unlocked the same office door, poured stale coffee into the same chipped mug, and reviewed reports involving neglected or financially exploited seniors. The work wasn't glamorous. Most days were spent studying bank statements, interviewing frightened grandparents, and documenting evidence that families wished would stay hidden. Over the years, my team helped recover millions of dollars stolen from elderly victims. We uncovered forged signatures, fake medical bills, forged property transfers, children who quietly emptied retirement accounts while pretending to be loving caregivers. After hundreds of investigations, I became good at recognizing warning signs. Sometimes it only took a single missing bank deposit. Sometimes it was unpaid medication. Sometimes it was isolation. And without realizing it, I had already begun noticing those same warning signs inside my own family. The strange part was that no one back home knew any of this. To them, I was simply Claire, the daughter who left town and never made anything of herself. That version of me was easier for them to believe. Then the truth? Unfortunately for them, the truth was already coming. 3 years earlier, nothing about my grandmother raised any alarms. At least, not at first. Grandma Evelyn had always been the kind of woman who could out-organize an accountant. Bills were paid the day they arrived. Receipts were filed in neat little envelopes. Her checkbook balanced down to the last penny. Growing up, every Sunday afternoon meant sitting beside her on the porch swing with the local newspaper spread across our laps. She loved word puzzles, not because she was trying to beat the clock, because, as she'd always say with a smile, words tell the truth when people won't. Back then, I thought she was talking about crossword clues. Years later, I realized she was talking about life. When I was 17, she slipped $500 into my backpack before I left for college. "Don't argue," she'd whispered. "Your mama doesn't need to know." That money bought my first semester's textbooks. It also bought something much bigger, a future. My mother never understood why Grandma helped me. She saw college as some fancy dream that regular folks weren't meant to chase. After all, she dropped out at 18 when she became pregnant with my older brother, Caleb. Life got hard. Dreams got packed away. And somewhere along the road, resentment settled into her heart like dust that never gets cleaned out. She never actually said she hated my success. She didn't have to. every sarcastic comment did the talking for her. Every holiday, she'd smile at relatives and say things like, "Claire still hasn't figured life out," or, "She's probably sitting behind another computer pretending to work." People would chuckle. Some looked uncomfortable. Most simply nodded. No one asked me a single question. Honestly, that was fine by me. The less they knew about my job, the better. Professional habits don't disappear after 10 years. Loose lips ruin investigations. That lesson had been drilled into me from day one. Then things slowly started changing. Our weekly phone calls became shorter. Grandma would suddenly, "I better let you go, sweetheart. Or, your mama's back." Click. Conversation over. At first, I figured Mom was just being, well, Mom. Critical, controlling. Nothing new there. But then Grandma mentioned something that made every instinct I had slam on the brakes. They switched my arthritis medicine. I frowned. "Did your doctor explain why?" There was a long pause. "I don't remember seeing him." My stomach dropped. That wasn't normal. Not even close. A week later, I offered to drive down for lunch. Mom answered the phone before Grandma could. She isn't feeling up to visitors. The following weekend, same answer. The weekend after that, same story. Every excuse sounded rehearsed, like someone reading from the same script. I'd heard those exact excuses dozens of times while interviewing families under investigation. They're confused. They're resting. Today's just not a good day. 9 times out of 10, the senior wasn't the one making that decision. The caregiver was. I leaned back in my office chair the next morning, staring at my computer screen. A brand new exploitation case sat open in front of me. Different victim, different county, same warning signs. Isolation, medication changes, restricted communication. I rubbed my temples. "Come on, Claire," I muttered under my breath. "Tell me I'm overthinking this." Deep down, I already knew I wasn't. Because after 10 years in this job, your gut usually knows the truth long before your heart is ready to believe it. About a month later, one small detail turned my concern into something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't a frantic phone call. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It was a property tax record. Most people don't realize those records are public. All you need is a name, a county, and about 30 seconds. During my lunch break, I pulled up the county website and searched Evelyn Carter. The page loaded. I blinked. Then I refreshed it. Still the same. Property taxes? Delinquent. 8 months overdue. I leaned closer to the monitor. No way! Grandma hadn't missed a payment in over 50 years. She used to joke that she'd pay her taxes before she'd buy herself a new pair of shoes. Something was seriously off. That afternoon, I called her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Harper. She'd lived beside Grandma for nearly 30 years. If anyone noticed changes, it'd be her. She answered on the second ring. "Claire?" Her voice sounded relieved. "Bless your heart, honey. I've been hoping you'd call." That sentence alone made my chest tighten. "What's been going on?" Mrs. Harper lowered her voice. "I hardly ever see your Grandma outside anymore." That wasn't like Grandma. She loved sitting on the porch every morning with coffee and watching the birds. What about her garden? Silence. Then, it's gone. I frowned. "What do you mean, gone?" "The tomatoes dried up months ago. Weeds everywhere. She hasn't been out there all summer." I grabbed my notebook. Professional instinct. Always document everything. Date, time, observation. Then I asked about my parents. Mrs. Harper sighed. Your daddy keeps shaying up in that shiny new pickup. I looked toward the tax records still open on my computer. New pickup? Mm-hmm. And your mama? Always saying she's taking care of everything. Another note. Then Mrs. Harper added something that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Honey, I haven't seen your grandma check her own mailbox in months. I stopped writing. Who gets it? Your daddy. Every single day. My pulse quickened. In my line of work, controlling someone's mail was a huge red flag. Bank statements, retirement checks, insurance notices, medical bills, everything flows through the mailbox. Control the mail, you control the information. I thanked Mrs. Harper and ended the call. For several minutes, I just stared out my office window. Downtown Knoxville bustled below. People hurried across crosswalks. Traffic rolled by. Life looked completely normal. Meanwhile, 2 counties away, my grandmother might be losing everything she'd worked for. That Saturday, I decided I'd had enough. No more phone calls. No more excuses. I drove straight to the farmhouse. Same gravel driveway, same white fence, same old porch swing where we'd solved crossword puzzles together. But everything else looked different. The flower beds were dead. Leaves covered the front steps. One gutter sagged so badly it looked ready to fall. Grandma would have never let her home look like that. I knocked. A minute later, Mom opened the door just a few inches. What do you want? I came to see Grandma. She's resting. I'll wait. Mom folded her arms. Claire, give it a rest. She doesn't need visitors. I'll sit on the porch until she's awake. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then she shrugged. Suit yourself. The door slammed shut. I sat down in Grandma's old rocking chair. The same chair where she taught me that every puzzle had an answer if you stayed patient. 1 hour passed. Then another. No one came outside. Around sunset, Dad pulled into the driveway. His truck looked brand new. Chrome wheels, fresh tires, not a scratch on it. He climbed out wearing expensive work boots that had never seen a day's worth of mud. He spotted me immediately. You still here? I'm waiting for Grandma. He laughed. Short. Cold. Ain't happening. I looked at the truck, then back at him. Nice ride. His smile disappeared. For just a second, I caught something in his eyes. Not confidence. Not anger. Nervousness. Plain and simple. He turned without another word and walked inside. I stayed on that porch another 15 minutes before driving back to Knoxville. The entire ride home, one thought kept repeating in my mind. People with nothing to hide don't work this hard to keep family away. The breakthrough came from someone nobody in my family ever paid much attention to. Mrs. Harper. She wasn't loud. She wasn't nosy. She was just the kind of neighbor who noticed when something felt off. One Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed while I was reviewing case files. Her name flashed across the screen. Claire, she whispered. I think I found something. I stepped into an empty conference room and closed the door. What happened? You remember that little savings account your grandma opened years ago? I did. Grandma had once joked it was her rainy day fund. Only 2 people had legal access to it. Grandma and Mrs. Harper. Mrs. Harper explained that she'd stopped by the bank to update some paperwork. While she was there, she asked for a recent statement. The teller printed it without hesitation. I almost dropped it, she said. 3 cash withdrawals. $500 each. made over the past 6 weeks. Same ATM, same day of the week, every Wednesday morning, exactly when my mom drove into town for groceries. I closed my eyes. Was Grandma with her? No. Did Grandma authorize them? I asked her yesterday. Mrs. Harper paused. She had no idea the money was even missing. That was enough. Dead serious. I'd built criminal cases with less evidence than that. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with my supervisor. Tom Reynolds had been in Adult Protective Services for over 20 years. Nothing surprised him anymore. He looked up as I walked into his office carrying a folder. "You look like you haven't slept." I probably haven't. I sat down. "It's my grandmother." His expression changed immediately. Family cases were every investigator's nightmare. I explained everything. The missed property taxes, the medication, the isolation, the suspicious withdrawals, the neighbor statements. When I finished, Tom stayed quiet for several seconds. Then he sighed. "You already know you can't investigate your own family." "I know. So what are you asking for?" "I want another investigator assigned." He nodded once. "Anyone in mind?" "Sarah Mitchell." Sarah was one of the sharpest investigators in our regional office. Methodical, patient, impossible to intimidate. If anyone was going to handle this fairly, it was her. Tom slid an official reporting form across the desk. "I'll assign Sarah." He looked me straight in the eye. "But Claire, this stops being your case the moment you sign this." I understood exactly what he meant. Professionally, I had to let go. Personally, there wasn't a chance. I picked up the pen anyway. Writing my grandmother's name under victim information felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Evelyn Carter, age 79. Possible financial exploitation. Possible neglect. Possible isolation. I'd filled out hundreds of these reports over the years. This one took me nearly 5 minutes to finish. When I signed the last page, Tom quietly placed his hand over the file. "You did the right thing." I wanted to believe him. 9 days later, Sarah called. Her voice was calm. Almost too calm. "Claire, we got the subpoena." My heart sank. "And? We need to talk in person." 30 minutes later, we were sitting in a secure conference room. She laid several bank statements across the table. Page after page, month after month. Grandma's retirement account had once held nearly $140,000. Now, there was barely $5,000 left. Transfers, cash withdrawals, checks written to fake contractors, payments for repairs that never happened. Money flowing out almost every single month. Sarah slid one page toward me. This one caught my attention. A payment for a full roof replacement. Nearly $6,000. I remembered the sagging gutters, the cracked shingles. Nothing had been repaired. Another payment listed expensive medical equipment. Grandma didn't own any of it. Then Sarah showed me the pharmacy records. Grandma's arthritis medication hadn't been picked up in almost 4 months. Meanwhile, someone had spent thousands on luxury purchases. Designer clothing, sporting goods, truck accessories. I stared at the pages. Every number told the same story. Someone wasn't just borrowing Grandma's money. They were bleeding her dry. Sarah leaned back and folded her arms. Claire, I think we're looking at a felony. I nodded slowly. So do I. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized this investigation wasn't just going to tear my family apart. It was going to end with handcuffs. The next step wasn't dramatic. There were no flashing lights, no surprise arrests. Cases like this don't work that way. They move one document at a time, one witness at a time, one piece of evidence after another. A week later, Sarah and I met with the assistant district attorney. His office overlooked downtown Knoxville, but nobody was paying attention to the view. Every file on his desk represented someone whose trust had been betrayed. Ours was just the newest one. Sarah walked him through everything. The missing money, the fake repair invoices, the unpaid medication, the bank withdrawals, Mrs. Harper's statement, the delayed property taxes. He listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting down notes. When she finished, he closed the folder. You've got enough to pursue financial exploitation, he said. But there's one thing missing. I already knew the answer. My grandmother. He nodded. I need to hear directly from her, without anyone coaching her. That was the problem. Mom rarely left Grandma alone anymore. Visitors were turned away, phone calls were monitored. Every path led back to the same locked door. The ADA tapped his pen against the desk. If she reaches out voluntarily, everything changes. Those words stayed with me all the way home. 2 nights later, I tried calling again. Mom answered. What now? I just want 5 minutes with Grandma. She's tired. I'll wait. No. Mom. She cut me off. You've got some nerve calling after disappearing for all these years. I stayed calm. You've been telling everyone I disappeared. I moved 45 minutes away. That's not exactly the moon. She ignored that. You always thought you were better than us. I never said that. You didn't have to. Her voice kept getting louder. You got your fancy degrees, your office job, your city friends. And look where it got you. I almost laughed. If only she knew. Instead, I said quietly, Can I please speak to Grandma? No. The line went dead. I looked at my phone for a long moment before setting it on the kitchen table. Years ago, one of my training instructors gave us a piece of advice. Never argue with someone who's already decided you're the villain. Just document the facts. So that's exactly what I did. Date, time, duration, summary of conversation. Professional habits die hard. I reached out to my older brother, Caleb. Unlike Mom, he actually answered. Hey, can you check on Grandma for me? A long silence. Then he sighed. Claire, you're making this into a bigger deal than it is. I don't think I am. Mom's taking care of everything. She always has. I rubbed my forehead. Caleb, the property taxes haven't been paid. They're handling it. Grandma's medication hasn't been filled. I'm sure there's an explanation. There isn't. His voice hardened. You left. And stayed. You don't get to come back now and tell us how to run this family. That one stung. Not because it was true. Because I knew he believed it. Caleb wasn't greedy. He wasn't stealing money. He was trapped inside the version of the story Mom had spent years creating. In his mind, I was the outsider. She was the hero. People rarely question a story they've repeated long enough. A few days later, Mrs. Harper called again. This time, her voice was trembling. "Claire, I think your grandma's trying to tell you something." "What happened?" "I stopped by this morning while your mama was at the grocery store. Your grandma handed me part of Sunday's newspaper." I stood up so fast, my chair rolled into the wall. What was on it? A puzzle. One of those word puzzles you two always worked on. I could hear paper rustling over the phone. There were 4 words circled. My pulse quickened. What words? Mrs. Harper took a slow breath. Help. Another pause. Trust. Then, me. She swallowed hard. And down in the bottom corner, she circled one more word. I closed my eyes. What was it? Mrs. Harper whispered. Thanksgiving. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. After all these years, Grandma had just spoken the one language only the 2 of us understood. And this time, I wasn't going to be a minute late. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and quiet. The kind of crisp Tennessee morning where the fields are covered in frost and the roads are nearly empty because everyone is home with family. Ironically, I was driving toward the very people who had spent years pretending I wasn't part of theirs. I parked a little down the road instead of pulling into the driveway. Sarah arrived a minute later in her state-issued SUV. Behind her was Deputy Collins from the county sheriff's office. We exchanged a few words. No speeches, no pep talks. The evidence would do the talking. At exactly 12:30 p.m., we walked up the front steps together. The smell of roasted turkey drifted through the screen door. Inside, I could hear laughter. Someone was telling one of Dad's old fishing stories. For a second, I almost remembered what it felt like to belong there. Then, Sarah knocked. 3 calm, firm knocks. The room fell silent. My brother, Caleb, opened the door. His smile disappeared the instant he saw the deputy standing beside us. Claire? He looked from me to Sarah, then to the badge on the deputy's chest. What is going on? Sarah answered first. We need to speak with Evelyn Carter. His face lost all color. He stepped aside without saying another word. The dining room looked exactly as I remembered. The same oak table, the same china Grandma only used on holidays, the same faded family photographs hanging on the walls. Only this year, everything felt different. Mom stood beside the turkey with the carving knife still in her hand. Dad was halfway through pouring sweet tea. Aunts, uncles, cousins, church friends. Nearly 20 people stared at us. Grandma sat quietly at the end of the table wearing her favorite blue cardigan. The moment she saw me, she smiled. Not because help had arrived, because she knew I had understood her message. Sarah placed the investigation file gently on the table. We are conducting an official investigation into suspected financial exploitation of Mrs. Evelyn Carter. The room became so quiet, you could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Mom scoffed. Oh, give me a break. This is Thanksgiving. Dad forced a nervous laugh. There's been some misunderstanding. Sarah calmly opened the folder. One page after another. Bank statements, property records, fake invoices, ATM withdrawals, pharmacy reports. Each document told the same story. Money had disappeared. Medication had stopped. Bills had gone unpaid, while luxury purchases continued. Nobody at that table said a word. Finally, Mom looked straight at me. "You did this?" I met her eyes. I didn't. The evidence did. Then she laughed bitterly. "So what now? You finally get to prove you're smart than the rest of us?" I shook my head. "No. I came to protect Grandma. That's all." Grandma slowly pushed her chair back. Mrs. Harper helped her stand. Her hands still trembled from arthritis. But her voice was steady. "I spent my whole life teaching children to tell the truth." She looked around the table. "I never imagined I'd have to teach my own family the same lesson." Nobody moved, not even Dad. Grandma reached into the pocket of her cardigan. She pulled out the folded crossword page, the one with the circled words. She handed it to Caleb. "I hoped one of my children would notice." She looked at him kindly. "But my granddaughter did." Caleb stared at the paper for several seconds before covering his face with both hands. "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. "I should have listened." Grandma gently touched his shoulder. "I know, sweetheart, and you still can." Sometimes forgiveness doesn't begin with excuses. Sometimes it begins with honesty. Over the following months, the investigation continued. The court froze Grandma's financial accounts until everything could be sorted out. Most of the stolen money was recovered through insurance, restitution orders, and the sale of several assets. Not every dollar came back. Some never would. But Grandma no longer had to choose between paying bills and buying medicine. Volunteers from the church repaired the roof. Neighbors rebuilt her garden. Mrs. Harper visited nearly every afternoon. And Caleb? He came every Sunday. At first, the conversations were awkward. Healing usually is. But little by little, trust found its way home. One afternoon, he showed up carrying a brand new crossword puzzle book. Grandma smiled. "Looks like somebody finally wants homework." They both laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from our family in years. The following spring, I drove back to the farmhouse. The gutters had been replaced. Fresh flowers lined the porch. The tomato plants were already climbing their stakes. Grandma sat in her favorite rocking chair with 2 cups of coffee waiting. She handed me a sharpened pencil. "Ready?" I unfolded the newspaper. The first clue read, 9-letter word meaning inner strength built through hardship. I smiled. Without hesitation, I filled in the boxes. Resilience. Grandma looked over my shoulder and nodded proudly. I would have accepted that. We both laughed. The breeze carried the smell of fresh soil across the yard. For the first time in a very long while, the farmhouse felt like home again. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment if you've ever been underestimated. And subscribe, because on this channel, silence always finds its voice.